Hello and welcome. My name is Sam Wróbel and I am a paper cutting artist. Today we are going to create paper snowflakes, just like all these you see behind me. This video is part of the Acadiana Center for the Arts online series, Virtual Art Studio, where teaching artists like myself present lessons in visual art, dance, music, and more that you can enjoy from anywhere. So, when you think about art, you might think about people that make art with paint, or people that draw with pencils or markers or crayons, right? But the main kind of art that I make is made from paper. I use scissors and I cut paper, and that's how I create my designs, my art. When I tell people this, often people will say, "Oh, I remember cutting paper snowflakes when I was a kid." So maybe you've already done something like this before, and if that's the case, hopefully you can learn something to make your snowflakes look even cooler, right? But if you're completely new to this, perfect. I will tell you everything you need to know to make snowflakes just like this. So my ancestors came from the country of Poland, which is in Eastern Europe. And in Poland, they have a paper cutting art tradition called wycinanki. That's kind of a tricky word, right? It's Polish. It's okay if you can't say it. It's wycinanki. And I was lucky enough to learn wycinanki when I was a kid, like you. So in wycinanki, there is a design called gwiazda, which is another tricky word. It just means star, like the stars in the sky, right? And it's a very similar technique to these snowflakes. And I once saw a video of a lady in Poland who talked about her region of Poland where she grew up. And in that part of Poland, it used to be covered with forests everywhere, trees everywhere. And the people in this area started making stars out of paper to decorate their homes because they couldn't really see the stars in the sky because there were so many trees blocking the way, right? So I think this is a great project, even though we live in South Louisiana, where thankfully, if you ask me, it doesn't snow very often, but we can still make the snowflakes and bring them inside, right? I grew up in Illinois, near the city of Chicago, and there it snows a lot in the wintertime. So I saw a lot of snowflakes when I was a kid. Again, I'm kind of glad that it doesn't snow here too often, but it has snowed a couple times in the last few years, so you've probably seen a snowflake or two. And even if you haven't seen one in person, you probably have seen snowflakes on TV, right? Or snow, right? They're icy crystals that form together to make these beautiful, tiny little snowflakes, and when they get heavy enough, they fall from the sky, right? And that's when we see the beautiful snow falling. And if you've ever seen a snowflake up close, whether you were able to catch one in your hand if it was snowing, or you saw a picture, you'll notice they're all so beautiful. They're very small, but they're very beautiful. And you may have heard that no two snowflakes are exactly alike. Each one is different from the other. And that's just like people, right? And I think that's what makes people so amazing is everybody is different, and that's what makes people beautiful. So we're all kind of like snowflakes in that way. And it's good to know too that when you're making these, there's no perfect way to do it, right? I want you to create your own designs. I am providing a template that you can print out. It'll be in the description of this video, and you can use that to get started. But for the most part, after you sort of get the hang of it, I would really encourage you to make up your own designs and your unique snowflakes, okay? And I'm gonna teach you everything you need to know how to do that, all right? So I brought with me a picture of some snowflakes up close. This is from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration photo library that they have online, and they have a bunch of cool science pictures. And here you can see real life snowflakes, right? Look how different they all are. Each one is unique, which means special and different. And that's gonna be like the ones that we cut out of paper today. But something we will notice about these is they do have some things in common. They all look kind of cold and icy, right? And a lot of that is achieved by these like straight lines and angles that are in each of these snowflakes. So that's something that we can think about when we're cutting our snowflakes and creating our designs, right? There's still some curves in there, but for the most part, there's lots of straight lines, right? You see, like a lot of these have little branches coming out like this. And you can see in some of the snowflakes I cut that are behind me, I did things like that. So we can think about that if we want it to look more like an actual snowflake, right? And another thing is that pretty much all of the snowflakes have 6 points. So we'll count them, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you'll notice all of the different snowflakes, even though they're very different here, they all have that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points. And when you're folding the paper in order to get 6 points, it's a little bit tricky. So that's going to be a big part of what I show you. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do that so it looks really cool. So real quick, let's talk about supplies here. If you want to do a whole bunch of these, I recommend getting white origami paper. You can go online with a grown-up and find big packs of them. I have a ton of it because I like making these snowflakes, right? And the nice thing about origami paper is it comes in a square and it's thinner. But I don't want you to have to go get anything new for this. So hopefully you have some regular printer paper in your house, and I'll show you how to use that as well. For scissors, I just want you to find scissors that you are comfortable with and that you like to use. These happen to be the ones that I started learning Vichinanki with when I was a kid, but if you have ones with curved edges that make them a little safer, that's great. If you have ones that are smaller or bigger, just depending on the size of your hand, that's great too. Just find scissors that you like and feel safe with. A tool that you don't absolutely need but would make this a lot easier is this. This is called a protractor. You might have used one for math class before. It is a tool used to measure angles, and it will help us get the special fold that we need to get those 6 points, right? But I'll show you how to do it without one too, so don't worry if you don't have one. And lastly, we just need a pencil to draw some guidelines for ourselves or to trace the template if you're using the printed out template. So that's all we need. Let's get started. All right, so if you're starting with origami paper like this, it's already in a square. But if you're starting with printer paper, we have a rectangle, right? So the first thing we're going to do is turn this rectangle into a square. And this is how we're going to do that. We're going to take this bottom corner here, and we're going to fold it over. The idea is to line this edge up with this edge of the paper and make a point over here, right? And once we got that lined up, I'm going to press down nice and hard here. And as you can see, we've got sort of a smaller rectangle here and then a triangle here. You don't have to if you can see the line well, but I'm going to trace here so you can see it a little better on the video at least. And that's where I'm going to cut. This does not even have to be perfect. Just going to cut off that extra. Get rid of that. All right. And when we unfold this, you can see now we have a square. And that first fold that we make is going to be the fold that we made to make the square. So if you're starting with the square origami paper, you want to do it the same way, where you take one corner to another corner and then smooth that down. Then what we're going to do, we have this set up with the open edges on the top and the folded line down here. And we're going to take the corner on the right, just bring it over here to the corner on the left and match that up. And once that looks nice and straight, we're going to press this down.
But then we're going to unfold that. Now you definitely don't have to do this. I'm going to trace this fold line. Oops, there we go. Just so you can see it better on the video. So the idea now to get that 6-point snowflake that we were talking about is we're going to fold one edge over and then the other edge over like this. But that can be a little tricky to line it up, right? So if you happen to have a protractor, now is when we're going to use it. What you'll do is take it and line up 90 with that line in the middle. And if you've learned anything about geometry, you know that 90 degrees is what we call a right angle, which is sort of like the corner of a square. And then we're going to look for the number 60. And then draw a little dot right there. If you happen to have a bar like this on your protractor, you can line that up with the 60 and then draw a line against that. But if you don't, you have that dot there, you want to make another dot right at the bottom of that fold, and you can use the straight edge to draw a line. And then we're going to fold this corner up against that line. The bottom of that fold is the bottom of the middle fold that we made earlier. And then you will take this corner and fold that right over so this edge is right against the other one. And you will find, because we measured that out, it lines up perfectly. So what do you do if you don't have a protractor? What I will do is I'll just kind of eyeball it, and I'll kind of bring the paper over without pressing it down, and you can kind of move it. It's almost like a little flower bouquet or something here, and just sort of try different angles. That doesn't really line up, so we'll try it like this until you sort of get something that works right. It'll look like this from the back, and you can, you know, try it, and if it looks really uneven, just keep trying it till you get it. But this is the basic idea. Now, I find with printer paper, it's a bit thicker than origami paper, which is part of the reason I prefer to use the origami paper. So when I use printer paper, I often stop here and don't fold it anymore, because the more you fold it, the more difficult it is to cut through all the different layers that we folded, right? So I'm going to leave this like this, but if you're using origami paper, or if you think that you can handle cutting through the printer paper, that line that we folded on earlier, we're going to fold this whole thing in half. To make it like this. And it will be a little bit less drawing and a little bit less cutting to do it this way. But like I said, with the printer paper, I find it really hard to cut, so I would recommend this fold only if you're using the thinner origami paper. So for this one, I'm going to go back to like this. So here we have both versions. This is the larger printer paper that we didn't fold the second time, and this one is the same thing, but we just folded it one more time. So do whatever makes sense to you. The difference when we're drawing is we're just going to have to draw two sides on this one, and if we folded it, then we only have to draw one side. But it starts the same way. So I'm going to turn it over like this. And we're going to start with a curved line, like the edge of a circle. It kind of goes like this. It does not have to be perfect. The idea is you can see that other paper is folded, so we want to get below that so that we don't have weird jagged edges. And if we're doing this, then we're just going to do half of that. We're basically just using one, it's like one section of this. So when we looked at, I can grab that picture of the snowflakes and get some inspiration. So I'm going to start with a straight line like this coming down. And I'm going to do a little V shape, maybe a little point like that, maybe a little point up here. Not going to get too crazy with it. Maybe I'll put one more line coming out, like some of these in the picture. And if I'm drawing both sides, then I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side. Just the best you can. Does not have to be perfect, right? All the snowflakes are different in real life and in paper form. But I have this middle line here will kind of show us, and we call this symmetry, where it's sort of a mirror image. And then I'm going to make a line like this that comes out, and maybe I'll cut some V shapes out of this. I think it looks more icy and snow-like if you use more straight lines, which also happen to be easier to cut. And then we can maybe put some shapes coming out from the sides here. Maybe a diamond or a triangle. It'll look like a diamond later. And then I'm going to do a point like that. Now to do the same thing on the folded, the extra folded, I'm just going to draw 1/2 of this. So I'm going to do a similar design just so I can show you how similar it is, it does not look much different when it's all done with. This is a smaller piece of paper, so I'm going to draw it a little bit smaller. And the nice thing when you fold it an extra time is you can also put a cut over here, which is harder to do on the other one. But there's a very similar design, as you can see. Does that make sense? I hope so. All right. So, and before we cut, it might be helpful to shade in some of these pieces, so when you're cutting, it's a little easier to see what you're cutting out. When you design one of these, you want to think about where the folds are. You need to keep parts of the fold together and not cut all of it out, otherwise your snowflake will fall apart. So as you can see, I'm cutting all this out, but where this fold is, all of this is still in one piece, and then I'm cutting a little piece out here, but this is connected, cutting a little piece out here, but this is connected. And that is what is really important. Otherwise, the whole thing will fall apart and then it'll be like really tiny snowflakes, right? So just shading that in so you get an idea of what we're going to be cutting out in just a second here. I'm getting really messy about it, just to be fast. And you don't have to shade it in if you feel like you know what you're doing, but it can be helpful at the beginning. And if you're using that template, you can cut it out of the paper you printed out and just trace it right onto your folded paper. All right, so for these, we just have to do a little more cutting. We're gonna start, you wanna hold the scissors in your dominant hand, which for a lot of people is their right hand, but some people it's their left hand. For me, it is my right hand. And I'm gonna hold the paper that I'm cutting in my left hand. And you will notice that instead of moving the scissors around in a bunch of crazy ways, I'm gonna move the paper. And that helps so that I'm not, stabbing myself, right? Because we don't wanna do that. I'm gonna move this out of the way so you can see better. All right, so I'm gonna start by cutting along that curved line that we started with. And then what I like to do is just sort of cut out some of this part where I had shaded, just to get it out of the way, because it can be a little bit easier to cut into these pieces. And when you're cutting folded paper, you want to start with the outside edges. This is where it's the most folded, right? So we're going to do that last. And that helps it stay in one piece and makes it a little bit easier to fold and a little bit safer to cut. So I'm going to turn the paper this way so I can start cutting. And I'm just using little straight lines. And I'm cutting away from myself so I don't hurt myself. And if you ever cut something and it's not quite falling, like the piece you want to come out isn't quite coming out, that just means the cut needs to go a little bit farther, so don't rip it out. That could create a big rip in your snowflake. So just gently take the scissors and just sort of cut in that corner again very carefully, and then you will loosen it. And I always find cutting paper to be nice and relaxing. So when I get to this, I'm going to cut this big line here, and then I'm going to cut the smaller triangles out of that. See how that looks? Now I'm just going to do the exact same thing on the other side. I will say also, if you want to make both sides different, you can do that too. This is just how you make it look like you folded it one more time without actually folding it one more time. And it gets that classic snowflake 6-point. Definitely pause the video to catch up. I only have so much time for the video, so if I'm going way too fast for you, definitely just pause the video, because this is supposed to be fun. We don't want to rush through it. We definitely don't want to hurt ourselves. We just want to take our time and enjoy making snowflakes. You can also notice I'm not always exactly following the lines, and the lines that I drew out are just a guideline, but it's always a little bit different when you're using scissors. And also, maybe I changed my mind and I want to do something a little different. That's totally okay. So this is what the printer paper folded less looks like when it's all cut. I'm going to leave that there for now, and now I'm going to go back to my origami paper where I drew a similar design, but I only had to draw it one time because I took this and folded it in half. But if you start cutting this paper and you're like, wow, this is really hard to cut, you should stop and unfold it. And if you need to, draw it out here, because it is not very safe or fun to cut paper that is too difficult to cut. So that's why I gave you two different ways. I'm going to cut out this extra space. The nice thing about paper too is if you mess up, there's probably more paper around and you can start over. Like all art, this takes some practice to get it to where you really like it. So the best way to get better is just to keep doing it. I don't want to see anybody beating themselves up for not making a perfect snowflake, because there is no such thing as a perfect snowflake, and also every try is worth something. That's how we learn, okay? So just have fun. I'm going to put one more tiny cut in here. All right, so that's what the origami paper looks like. Get all these scraps out of the way. You can use that as confetti if you want. So now comes the fun part, the big reveal. I'm going to start with this one, and we're going to unfold it. we're just doing the opposite of what we did when we folded it, but we're going to be very careful because the paper is a lot more delicate now. It can break a lot more easily now that we cut parts of it out. So we want to be really gentle. So every time I unfold a fold, you see me kind of pressing down on it to sort of flatten it out again. There we go again, flatten that out. Very carefully. Flatten this out too, and look at that! And we have those 6 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, even though we only folded it less times. Now let's see how the other one looks. It's the same idea, but since we folded it one more time, we're just going to have one more fold that we need to unfold. And then the big reveal. There we go. So wasn't that fun? Doesn't that look cool? I hope you're proud of what you made. I think it's so exciting to take a plain piece of paper like this and turn it into beautiful art. And it's just so rewarding, if you ask me. So if you made 1 or 2, you can go and keep using this technique to make more and more snowflakes and have your own little blizzard of snow.
So now that we're all done cutting our snowflakes, we can use them to decorate. You can decorate a table where people are eating. That could be pretty, right? You can give them as gifts. You can put them inside a holiday card. You can tape them to a window. That's what I like to do, or to a bigger piece of paper like this, or maybe a wall. But definitely ask permission from a grown-up before you start taping these anywhere. Also, if you tape them, they might fall apart when you take them down, so just be aware of that. For me, that's just a good excuse to make more. But if you really like it, maybe don't put tape on it. You can also put string through some of the holes that you cut here and hang them on a Christmas tree, or hang them from the ceiling and make a cool snowy effect. Just get creative and think of different ways to use these, and then you can just make a whole lot of them, right? So thank you so much for creating with me today, and be sure to tune in next week for a new virtual art studio. Thanks, y'all.